came to my apartment after they left the police station, and when they came down the hall, I knew. Do you remember that? And I just looked there and I go, I think I collapsed. Yeah, that's how I found out.
Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Murder Police Podcast, The Murder of David Kelm, Part 2 of 2. So, at one point, our lead detective took me out on the rooftop, and he was standing there with two other detectives, and I was like, what is going on? You know, I didn't know, but then when I looked up and he was, had his arm crossed with the left hand over the top of the right arm, I did not want to hear what he had to say.
Something inside told you that that's why they took you out to break that news to you.
And I looked at him and I just said, no, don't say it. And I almost passed out. It was horrible. And then he told me to pull myself together, that I had to tell my nephew. And I said, all right. So it took me a while. So when I got myself together, come in through the rooftop door, and my nephew was sitting there in the chair with his hands between his legs, just nervous. And I got down on the floor in front of him and I grabbed his hands and I said, Daddy didn't make it. And then he looked at me, and that face, I love him so much. That face, I just said, I'm so sorry. And he just hugged me, just grabbed me, and then we hugged for a long time, and then he had to excuse himself from me. But he came right back. It just, that ripped our hearts out. Life changed that day forever for all of us.
I can't imagine getting that news and then having a job of delivering that news. God bless you for that. And Jessica, when were you brought into the loop that Davy had passed? Was it around the same time, or?
Rachel and my grandson, David's son, that was there at the murder, came to my apartment after they left the police station, and when they came down the hall, I knew. Do you remember that? And I just looked there and I go, I think I collapsed. Yeah, that's how I found out. It was Rachel. Just the look on her face.
And to help her in the door to sit down. And, we just all kind of huddled together and my nephew, we just comforted him as much as we could, and we got the same from him. And
well, I told him, I said, come on, honey, lay down. I know this is really hard. And he took off his little jacket, and I went and got a cold washcloth and washed his face.
he just laid in our arms.
And how old is he?
He was 15 at the time.
Gotcha.
So after this happened, were you all allowed to go to the hospital at that point, or were you not allowed to go see Davy?
Yeah,
tried to save him.
Well, again, they tried to reach out to his wife, and they were unsuccessful. So I just went there. Me and my nephew just went there, and we talked to the doctor. And we were the only family that had signed in. And then after that, we went to Mom's. Yeah, we sat down in a room. Or when we got there, we waited on the surgeon to come and talk to us. And he took us in the little room, the little chaplain room, the room you don't want to go in ever. And he explained to us what was going on, what he did, how he tried to help my brother, and that was unsuccessful.
But they did try to save him. There was the paramedic, he said that he thought he would be okay. And there was 30 medical team.
I had called fire department, the Major Brian Dawson. He was the first one on the scene. We didn't know what was going on, and I wanted to know. So I had called the fire department and asked who went to that address, that was my brother. And he explained to me how when he first got there, that my brother was on his hands and knees and saying, I've been shot. But that was after everything. That was the next day.
So the next day you reached out to the fire department and they called you about it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Davy was conscious for a little bit.
He was. When we got, what I got is that when they got there,
They stabilized
he was, in distress.
They stabilized him, and they thought they could save him.
Yeah, they stabilized him, and the one paramedic thought he would be okay. His vitals and everything, they got him stable, and there was a team of 30 doctors and nurses waiting on him before he even got there in the ambulance. And he didn't make it.
So unfortunately, that evening, Davy passed. Where did you all go from there? How did you pick up the pieces? What did you do next?
Well, you mentioned that their life changed, and how does it change? Because fortunately, not everybody in the world has to face what you all faced and what you're dealing with today. But how does it change you as a sister and a mother?
Oh, it's just like missing an arm or, missing a foot. I mean, it's not a whole life. It's something is missing.
I feel that it's an empty chair we have now. And it was the darkest day of my life. And I prayed that God would take me and let him live.
I think any of us,
because I'm an old lady.
But I think any of us as parents would say that prayer over and over again. I think we would.
Immediately, everything flashes before you. Holidays, birthdays, just that time that you would spend on a normal, basis, or a weekly basis or monthly. Anytime you see your family, you just think about those days are gone. But I did see him the Monday before the Tuesday that he got shot. And when he left, he was stalling around outside. I could see his truck lights still on. And I looked, and after we found out what we found out, I was like, I wish we could go back a day and I could go out there and just grab him, make him stay, But I'm glad that I got to see him one last time.
And I think we all do that with the people I've lost in my life. Is you go back to the last time you saw them and what you might do differently if you had a crystal ball. And
Yeah,
yes,
that's true.
Time. Yeah.
But I do remember something kind of funny. I had some jewelry, and I wanted Davy to keep it for me because I figured I would die before he did. And it was some jewelry from England, my birthstone, my class ring. And he goes, "Mom, are you crazy? I'm not going to, you'll die before me," or that I would die before him. And I said, "Davy, you never know." And I regret those words.
Life's a dance, like Garth Brooks.
Well, it's pretty clear that we're talking about this because this is an unsolved case. So, and one of the things that I know that was really tearing you up, Jessica and Rachel, because we have talked about it before, is this was in 2019, which, sometimes they take time. How many detectives have you had in leading this case so far?
We're on our 6th detective.
Wow. That's got to be frustrating.
Yeah, we've been tossed around, but we still keep fighting for justice.
And again, I think that's why we want to do this too, is to keep that fire in there. For me, even after doing this for a living, is I know what that's like to leave a case and how that feels. And because there's still, to this day, I can ride around and think of some of mine that I didn't lay down. And it haunts you forever. You feel very fortunate and blessed if you close one. That's the go. Mm-hmm. I know what it's like from that side. But I couldn't begin to probably appreciate the frustration of, like you said, being tossed around and having 6. And I think I know the reasons for the most part is, without going on a political stoop, and I'm not going to hit it too far, is that the Lexington Police Department, like every police department in the country, is short people, and people are leaving earlier than they've ever left, and we'll leave it at that. I remember, I think my first police chief, somebody had said that he was quoted one time that you can only give a community the policing once, and there's consequences. Everything has a consequence. And I know a lot of people that were there when I was there 2 years ago have left where they're just done. And they get their time in and they go on and they do different things. The sad part is there's people like you that are left with what those ramifications are. And so I keep thinking, 4 years and 6 detectives. And that just runs through the frustration that's got to be, because am I right or wrong? Does it feel like you're starting over every time?
It feels like the ride that
ripping
never
that
comes.
scab off a new time to start the story over again, relive the story again for a new detective, just to make you wonder how long before we have to retell the story to the next detective. And I would be incredibly frustrated, and I know you all are, because we talk about this. We've talked about it many times, and I can't imagine what you all are going through. I can't imagine losing my brother or my son. And then to have to keep reliving it. And the frustrating thing is somebody knows something. Yep. Somebody knows. And for 3 years, they've concealed it, but somebody knows. And our goal is to get this story out and hope that somebody will feel enough like a piece of crap to tell the story of what happened to David, because not only does David need justice, but you all as his family deserve answers.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You know, he was getting ready to retire with UPS. He's a father, a brother, an uncle, a son.
As we say, living his best life.
Yeah.
Despite any problems. And that's the big injustice of having somebody taken violently from any of us in it, is where they take them in their station of life. And
he'll forever be 46.
Exactly. It stops there, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, and I think the other sad thing about this, and you all would agree, those two sons of his, not the third, but the first two that he had with Angie, both those kids lost their parents to murder.
Within 3 years.
Yes.
To
They
me,
lost both their parents to murder.
I think about that a lot, knowing them,
Yes.
and just how unfathomable that must be. It's just the...
And Angie, we loved her.
She didn't deserve that either.
No.
And she had been through tragedy herself, because her second husband after David had committed suicide, and she was dealing with that. And then, when Davy was murdered, as I said earlier, she was heartbroken. So then she relived that. And then ultimately herself ended up being a victim of murder, and her husband committed suicide. So all this dark tragedy involving the two of them constantly circles in my mind, and it just is.
It's too much.
It's too much.
It's.
My nephews are on my heart every day. I really can feel with them what they're going through. I mean, I just want to grab them up and
Angie loved
hold
her
them,
children.
protect them.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
Everything was about them.
And children that weren't hers.
Right.
I mean, she fostered a
Many.
bunch of children, and adopted too, that she
Right.
fostered from birth. Angie just loved life, and Davy did too. And it's a sad story that the two of them didn't stay together, because I remember those days at Long John's. They were just young and in love, and David would sometimes swing by and see her if he could, and then planning the wedding and planning the baby shower for the first baby and then the second baby. And they had their little apartment here in Nicholasville that they had gotten, and then their first little house. And there was just a lot of good memories there. And it's very tragic, and it makes you realize how fleeting life can be, that so young it can just stop. And you look back and you think, what a horrible thing.
Well, I watched those kids grow together, Angie and my son David, and I can still hear her laugh.
Oh, yeah.
And that brings me a lot of joy, because nobody laughs like she did.
Oh, absolutely.
It's funny you say that, because I just had made a post on Facebook memorializing her 7th month anniversary of her death. And in one of those pictures, it captures it, and she's laughing so hard. And you can hear that laugh in your mind when you look at that picture.
Yeah.
It was contagious.
It was-
you couldn't help
yes.
but laugh with
It's
her.
like you want to make her laugh more.
Yes. And Rachel, I know you and she and Jessica, you and she were so close. I mean, you and her were big buddies, because your sons were born
9 months
yes,
apart.
They were close.
Yes. Yep. Angie, I love Angie. We had a great relationship, and it sucks that it took my brother getting shot for us to actually come back to each other. But we both had, said, I'm, glad that we're back together.
You put the hard
Let's-
feelings behind,
yes.
and you moved on. And then,
Yes.
unfortunately, as we know, that abruptly got ended
Yeah.
soon after you all reconciled.
Yes. Yes, it did, unfortunately.
So, my hope, and I know it's your all's hope, David, you and I have talked about this, and I'll say it again. Somebody knows something of who killed David Kelm on April 23rd, 2019. And I just wish somebody would feel it in their heart to tell. And I know people say, well, I'm not a snitch. I don't tell. But if put yourself in this family's shoes and realize you too would want answers. And it's only fair that Rachel and Jessica and the rest of the family get some sort of answer, and somebody needs to pay for what they've done.
That's another thing.
Absolutely.
He was shot in his home. I mean, this wasn't on the streets or...
Somebody came in with an intention to kill him.
Yeah, a shoot to kill.
It wasn't a drive-by. It wasn't a mistaken person.
Right.
It was very intentional.
And
yes.
We probably glossed over, but I've never heard any risk factors in David's life that in investigations, we assess our victims through risk factors. And that's not victim blaming, but for us, if I'm managing a case, for example, we look at the victim to see what kind of walk they were walking in their life, not to label them.
Right.
But that usually is where you start to find out where you might have it. And I've heard no risk factors. I mean, there's, which again makes it that much more difficult. But it also, it comes back to what Wendy said, the solvability still remains there because of the lack of those risk factors. So I guess what we're looking at in this case, and like Wendy just said, is somebody to have a conscience and a heart to come forward with even a small amount of information. I can tell you the longer it goes on, and I don't like to put it in the context of going long, the likelihood increases that other people know something because people talk. It's very rare that somebody holds any of this silent. And what I'm getting at with that is for both of you, from my experience, is that even though it's taking time, time isn't always a true enemy. And there are opportunities that can develop. And I don't know if that helps, but
it does.
Because it's true, is that, and I can tell you too from experience that I would have a hard time believing that these detectives, 1 through 6, when they walk and they transfer, or I think it was Detective Cobb retired, and I can tell you personally, you carry these, and they're thinking about you all the time. I have no doubt. I guess my advice is to keep your head up, keep the faith, keep praying for sure that this is a prayerful event, and try to be patient with the things in front of you. Because I've got to imagine that, tell me if I'm right or wrong, that every time you pick up the newspaper or get on the news and you see where somebody in Lexington has been murdered, am I right or wrong that it's like, my God, there goes that time that I need on Davy's case. And there's a truth to that too, but hang in there. The one thing that drives those men and women that do that kind of work is that none of us get into that murder business except for the reason of trying to bring something back to people that are hurting.
Right.
So that's why they're there.
I guess the hardest thing for us is the communication. Just, if I know it's not going to be solved overnight, but just a phone call, a return,
Exactly.
or, we had one detective that had to leave for military, and, a letter would have been nice, something,
It would, and coming from your position too, I understand that completely. Because on the other side, it's just a big working thing, and unfortunately, it gets very impersonal, and probably more impersonal than it ever should be.
And
granted.
so I can't imagine what they're dealing with on a daily. And I know, my brother's case is in there. It's in there, and we have a detective. But, my mom and I and our good friend Leanie, we won't stop. We are constantly trying to get answer,
Sure.
anything we can do to help the case, or just get answers. And we also joined a couple groups, survivors of gun violence. Anita Franklin
Yes,
in
beautiful
Lexington
woman.
started that, and her son Ricardo
She
Franklin
was the first
has
one to contact us when
took
Davy
over.
was murdered.
Yeah, she was the first to contact us. So that is an amazing group. All those girls.
Just a sidebar for the listeners is eventually I'd love to have Ricardo come and talk about his mother and his brother
Yes.
and how Anita. I don't want to go too far because I'll just tell the listeners that we'll do that one day, or we'll try to do that, because she was a beautiful woman, and
Yes, she was.
the efforts, the tragedy she suffered, and how she tried to turn that into something, and did turn it into something.
We all share that same pain.
Sure.
And I love those girls. I'm glad to be a part of that
And
group.
Sheriff Witt.
And
She
Kathy
was
Witt.
so-
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a wonderful sheriff here.
But our friend, my friend, and Davy's second mother, Leanie, her and I, we've had many meetings with different detectives. My friend Leanie, which we're trying to get her to talk.
Mom.
Leanie is here in the studio.
Right. I would like her to be a part of this. And we worked on a notebook, the notebook, and had a meeting. We worked on it 7 hours one night.
Leanie, we've had you in here in the studio with us during this podcast recording, and you've been over there so quietly observing, and we're glad to have you join in. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about us and your relationship with Jessica and Rachel and Davy, and share how this has affected you and as well as Davy's family.
Hey, I'm Leanie, and my son was friends with Jessica's youngest son. And they started being friends at daycare when they were 4. They're 41 now. My son grew up like with Jessica's kids, with Davy and Rachel and Michael. We were there all the time. So we saw Davy and Angie start dating. Davy and Angie fall in love. Davy and Angie get married, have their 2 sons. So we've been through this. Since 1986 together. I've seen a lot, done a lot. Davy was like a son to me. I sold him his first car and let him make payments when he was working at Kroger's. This has taken a toll on us too, because we love Davy and we loved Angie. Together, we all came up with, let's put all the facts together and get a notebook together and put what we know together and for us to keep and refer to. But let's also give a notebook to the police department so they don't have to ask questions and they've got this information in front of them. If they need to look or refer to anything, they can refer to it. And it's there in black and white and information. And so we've worked long and hard on that. It's, about 60 pages?
Exactly.
It's a lot.
Was it also cathartic to write all that down? Do you think it helped metabolize what's going on by actually putting it on paper and organizing it? Did it give you a sense of control of where this is going? Yeah.
Yes, it did. Because we didn't put anything in there that wasn't true.
Sure.
From day one. I owe Leanie, because she's and her son, which was Michael's, my youngest son's friend, to her son, Ryan, helped us on the notebook too.
I would have to think that it would probably at least get that feeling of getting that on paper and seeing it in front of you, for you too.
It did. And it helped when things weren't clear and you'd think, what happened? You could refer to the notebook.
Sure. Yeah. So the detectives have that. I know that if I was a detective, I would be grateful for that. If I was on,
they have a copy of it.
I would
Yes,
be grateful,
they do.
because that would be a place for all those thoughts are
Right.
put together. So I've often wondered what happened to Angie's little notebook that night. She had a spiral bound notebook up in the kitchen, and we were up there for 2 or 3 hours with her with that. So, yeah.
Yeah. She's been our rock. We started off as a group, family group, and it just kind of grew apart. The three of us are still fighting for justice.
We'll help you fight.
Thank you.
We'll keep
Thank
that
you.
in mind as much as we can.
It's encouraging.
Yeah. And again, don't forget to pray.
Oh, I pray.
That's big. That's big.
We pray all the time.
That's a huge thing.
We do.
in this.
We were so proud of our notebook because we even put it in plastic sheet protectors.
It
Oh,
was
sure.
very professional.
Yeah. I'll have to take a peek one day if you get a chance.
Oh, yes.
We've all got a copy.
I'd love to look through it.
We also had in here with us Rachel's youngest son, Landon. Landon, I understand you have something that you would like to share.
I just want to say that he was a really good uncle, and he was just cool. And one of my favorite memories, it was whenever we were at our old other house, and he would mow the lawn for us and give me $5, and I'll go every time the ice cream truck goes by, I'll spend it on ice cream. He's like, "Give me ice cream," and all this and that. So I give him ice cream. He's like, we would get him some ice cold water and popsicles, and
Landon, didn't Dave, your uncle Davy, didn't he give you some special card collection and something else?
Yeah, he gave
Figures?
me these. He gave me some of these UPS trucks and cars. It was an airplane and the semis and a Jeep and
The cards, were they Pokemon
oh yeah, he gave me a lot of Pokemon stuff
and
because
figures?
yeah, because his son likes Pokemon.
And he outgrew them.
And how old are you, Landon?
I'm 11.
Okay, good deal. Well, thanks for saying those kind of things about Davy, because that's what we're doing here today, too, is not just talking about the case, but about, again, leaving people with an impression of who Davy was. And that's very special.
Oh yeah, we hope to get justice for him.
In closing, again, first I want to thank you all for coming out and sharing David's story with us and our listeners. You know, I guess I'm just going to go ahead and reiterate. Please, if you know anything of the murder of David Kelm on April 23rd, 2019 in Lexington, Kentucky, even if it is a small, minute detail, something you may have heard, something you may have seen, share that with police. For this family, Rachel, Jessica, Leanie, and Landon, thank you all for coming out, sharing the story.
Thank you for having us, and you'll never know how much it means to us. And I love you both. And the critters.
And the critters.
Yes, thank you, Wendy and David. This is real special. We appreciate it a lot. Me, my family, everybody here. And yes, we love all the critters too.
I'm grateful that y'all came and shared, and thank you for sharing the difficult parts too. We have to keep him alive out in the world. Davey has to live on. He deserves that, and you deserve that. So thank you for making that possible.
I hope one listener somewhere will know something to help.
That's what this is about.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police podcast merch store, where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes
so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.